The worst part of what my brother said at his wedding was not that he mocked me. It was that he did it with a smile, while everyone was already sentimental enough to forgive almost anything. That is what made it land so hard. People were dressed beautifully, the room was glowing, and every face around me was ready to turn cruelty into comedy as long as it kept the celebration moving. If he had insulted me in private, it would have been different. Painful, yes. But private humiliation still leaves you room to protect your dignity. Public humiliation takes something else. It makes witnesses part of the injury. And what my brother did that night would have stayed one more ugly family memory if not for one detail no one else in the room understood at the time. His new CEO was sitting 10 tables away. She heard everything, and by the end of that night, the joke he thought would make him look larger had already started making him look small to exactly the wrong person. That is the kind of story people later tell on channels like Exposed Stories Media. Not because weddings are dramatic by nature, because they create the perfect stage for people to reveal who they really are when they think the room is on their side. And sometimes one careless moment, said in front of the wrong witness, can expose something much bigger than family cruelty. My brother's name is Evan. He was 3 years older than me, and for most of our lives he moved through the world with the kind of confidence other people mistake for destiny. He spoke quickly, decided early, and always seemed more interested in being impressive than being understood. When we were younger, adults loved that about him. They said he had leadership energy. That phrase followed him through high school, college, and eventually into the startup world, where leadership energy is often just another way of describing a man who knows how to make risks sound exciting before consequences show up. By the time he was in his early 30s, Evan had already built a reputation around speed, ambition, and social polish. He worked in product growth for a fast-rising software firm that had recently been acquired, and he carried himself like he was always 3 moves ahead of everyone else in the room. I was different. I did not know how to perform certainty the way he did. I liked building things slowly. I trusted systems more than speeches, prototypes more than pitch decks, and quiet traction more than loud branding. That difference defined our relationship long before either of us admitted it. To our parents, Evan looked like success. He wore the right suits, spoke the right language, and understood how to make other people feel included in his momentum. I looked less obvious. I worked alone for long stretches, lived more simply, and spent the better part of 2 years building an app that, to most of my family, sounded like a hobby stretched a little too far into adulthood. They called it my little app. Not always cruelly. At first, it sounded affectionate. The kind of phrase families use when they do not understand what you are building, but still want to sound supportive. But affection becomes dismissal when repeated often enough, especially by people who never bothered asking what the thing actually does. The app started as a practical idea. I had spent years doing freelance back-end work for small logistics and scheduling teams, and I kept seeing the same problem repeated in different industries. Mid-sized field service companies were losing time and money because their teams were relying on disconnected scheduling, outdated route coordination, and manual communication that broke every time demand spiked. I did not think I was inventing the future. I thought I was solving a boring, expensive problem. That is often how real products begin. Not with spectacle, with friction. I spent nights building the first version in a rented apartment where my kitchen table doubled as a test desk. I handled the code, the interface logic, the early user feedback, and the support messages myself. There were weeks when I barely spoke to anyone outside a handful of beta clients, and one former colleague who occasionally reviewed the architecture when I got too deep in my own head. My parents did not understand it. That was fine. Not everyone needs to understand the work you do. The problem was that Evan did understand enough to recognize that I was building something real, and instead of respecting that, he learned how to minimize it more elegantly than the rest of them. He would ask how the little app was doing in front of people who had no context. He would say things like, "My brother's building the next great scheduling empire out of his apartment," in a tone that made even supportive people laugh lightly before I could respond. He made my work sound cute, not useless. Cute is worse, because useless things can still be defended. Cute things are dismissed before they are evaluated. Over time, I stopped correcting him in family rooms, not because it did not bother me, because I realized family laughter has its own economy. If you challenge it, the room gets awkward and somehow you become the one who ruined the mood instead of the one who got turned into the joke. That pattern might have continued indefinitely if not for the wedding. Evan was marrying Caroline, a woman who was polished in a different way than he was. She was not as loud, not as performative, but very aware of social temperature and deeply invested in making sure every important person liked them as a couple. Their wedding was expensive in the exact way modern ambition likes to look effortless. White florals, warm lighting, designer place settings, and a guest list that mixed family with business contacts so deliberately that the whole event felt partly romantic and partly strategic. My mother was thrilled. My father kept saying this was the kind of wedding that marked a new era for the family. That sentence made me uneasy before I fully understood why. Because when people in my family talk about new eras, they are usually talking about status. The week before the wedding, my mother asked if I was still bringing a +1. I said no. Then she said something that should not have mattered, but did. She said, "That's probably easier. Evan's crowd can be a lot." Evan's crowd. The phrase captured something ugly and accurate. By then, he had built a social orbit made of founders, operators, aspirational executives, consultants, and people who were always between something big and something even bigger. They were the kind of people who spoke in shortcuts around value, scale, exits, and strategic timing, and if you were not fluent in that language, they made you feel it politely. Still, I went, because it was my brother's wedding, because my parents cared, because some part of me still hoped adulthood might have made him less interested in using me as contrast. The ceremony was beautiful. I mean that honestly. There is something cruel about beautiful settings. They make ugly behavior feel temporarily unreal, as if elegance itself can soften what people are really doing inside it. The reception began smoothly. Cocktails, speeches, laughter, the usual warm blur of staged intimacy and expensive optimism. I stayed mostly at my table, spoke to relatives, and tried not to think too much about how many of Evan's coworkers seemed more central to the emotional gravity of the room than half the family. That was when I noticed her. Mara Jensen. I knew the name because Evan had mentioned her twice in the month before the wedding. She was the newly appointed CEO of the post-acquisition company division he had just joined under a restructuring move he was very proud of. He talked about her with a strange mix of admiration and anxiety, which told me she mattered. She was younger than I expected. Not young, exactly, but younger than the kind of executive my parents would have imagined when they heard CEO. She had the posture of someone used to watching rooms carefully before deciding how much of herself to reveal to them. Calm, alert, and much harder to impress than the people laughing around her. She was seated near the front. Not family close. Business close. That distinction ended up mattering more than anyone knew. The speeches started after dinner. My father gave one. Then Caroline's maid of honor. Then Evan stood up, a little flushed from champagne and approval, holding his glass with the relaxed confidence of a man who believed the room had already decided to love whatever came next. At first, his toast was exactly what people expected. Warm stories, references to loyalty, a joke about marriage being the only merger more serious than corporate acquisition. The room laughed in all the right places. Then he turned toward the family tables. He thanked our parents. He thanked Caroline's family. Then he looked at me. That look lasted maybe half a second, but I knew it immediately. the same expression he used when he was about to make me useful to a room again. He smiled and said, "And I should thank my brother, who reminds me every day that persistence matters. He's been building the same little app for so long, it's become part of the family daycare." The room laughed. Not violently. Not yet. Just enough for me to feel the first flush of heat rise in my face. Then he kept going. He said, "If anyone here needs a calendar and a dream, see him after dessert." Louder laughter this time. Now the room had shape. My work was not serious effort. It was a prop. I was not a founder, a builder, or a problem solver. I was the family hobbyist in a room full of real achievers. He could have stopped there. Instead, one of his groomsmen shouted, "Maybe your company can acquire it out of pity." The room broke open. People laughed harder now because the boundaries had been set. Mockery was permissible. I looked down at the table and heard my aunt laugh, my cousin laugh, even my mother make the kind of embarrassed sound people make when they know something has gone too far but are too committed to the room to resist it. And then I heard Evan say the line that ended something between us for good. He raised his glass toward me and said, "At least one of us shipped." The room erupted. That was the moment. Not because the joke was especially clever. Because it was deliberate. He knew exactly what he was doing. He was turning my years of private work into a public symbol of failure so he could look sharper by contrast in a room filled with people whose opinion he wanted. I looked up once across the room. Not at Evan. At Mara. She was not laughing. That was the first sign that the night had not gone the way Evan thought it had. After the toast, I did what people often do when humiliation arrives too publicly to process in real time. I smiled once, nodded like I understood how family joking worked. Then I excused myself before anyone could decide that speaking to me kindly afterward would count as moral repair. I did not storm out. That would have made me the problem. Instead, I walked through the side hallway, past the floral display and the catering entrance, into the cold air behind the venue where no one could see my face. I remember standing there for almost 10 minutes, listening to muffled music through the wall and thinking how strange it is that a person can become lonelier inside a room full of people who have known them their entire life. My phone buzzed while I was still outside. It was a message from my mother. "Please don't take it too hard. He's excited." That message did more damage than the toast, because it told me the family would frame what happened exactly the way I feared. Not humiliation. Excitement. Not disrespect. A moment. That is how families protect the person with the most status in the room. I almost left without saying goodbye. Then I remembered my coat was still inside and walked back through the side entrance. That was when something unexpected happened. Mara was standing near the bar alone. Not entirely alone, maybe. People like her are never fully alone at events like that. But the space around her was less crowded than before, and when she saw me, she stepped slightly away from the cluster of guests as if giving me a choice. I would not have approached her on my own. Not out of fear, because the night had already taken enough from my dignity and I did not want one more conversation where I felt like the lesser person in a room built for other people's status. But she spoke first. She said, "You didn't deserve that." Just that. No elaborate sympathy. No performative softness. And because the sentence was so clean, I believed her. I said thank you and reached for my coat, hoping the moment would end before it became embarrassing in a different way. Then she asked, "What does your app actually do?" That question landed harder than the toast. Not because it was emotional, because it was the first serious question anyone at that wedding had asked me about my work in months. I explained it briefly. Field scheduling, dispatch coordination, route compression, reduced idle time and missed service windows for mid-sized teams. Nothing glamorous. She listened without interrupting. Then she asked who was using it. I told her I had a small but paying base of regional service businesses and 2 pilot groups testing an enterprise version with mixed but promising early results. Her expression changed slightly at that. Not impressed exactly. Interested. Then she said something that did not fully register until much later. She said, "You built that alone?" I said yes. She nodded once and gave me her card. Then she said, "If you ever want to talk seriously about it, not at a wedding, email me." That was all. No promise. No flattery. No dramatic setup. And because the interaction was so restrained, I did not know what to do with it. By the time I got home, I had almost convinced myself it had been little more than professional courtesy from someone embarrassed on behalf of a company executive who had just revealed bad instincts in public. The next morning, Evan texted me, "Hope you didn't take the toast personally." Mara loved the energy. That line told me 2 things at once. First, he had no idea what she and I had said. Second, he still believed performance could rewrite reality after the fact. I did not answer. 2 days later, I emailed Mara. Not because I expected anything enormous. Because I had spent too long letting rooms like that define my work through other people's language, and for once I wanted to put the thing itself in front of someone who might actually understand how to evaluate it. She replied the same day. We set a meeting for the following Friday. That week, something else happened. One of my small pilot clients renewed early and expanded user seats faster than expected because the app had cut missed route windows by more than 30% during the staffing shortage. That mattered technically, but more than that, it restored something in me the wedding had shaken. Evidence. I was tired of defending myself through feelings in rooms built on status. I wanted data, user behavior, retention, and outcomes. Those things do not laugh. They either hold or they don't. When I met Mara, the conversation was nothing like the wedding. No posturing. No vague founder worship. No language about dreams. She asked hard questions. Integration friction. Scalability constraints. Client concentration risk. Whether my current architecture would survive if a mid-market rollout happened faster than expected. I answered honestly. Not because honesty is noble by itself. Because small products die quickly when people start lying about what they can support. That, I would learn later, was exactly why she took me more seriously than Evan expected. At the end of the meeting, she said she was impressed. Not by the branding. By the discipline. She said too many product people know how to sell possibility but not how to survive growth. Then she added a sentence that connected the wedding to everything that came after. She said, "Your brother has a dangerous relationship with rooms." I asked what she meant. She said there are leaders who know how to read a room and leaders who need the room to validate them. The second type, she said, eventually makes decisions for the room instead of for reality. That sentence stayed with me because it did not only explain the toast. It explained the look on her face while everyone else was laughing. 3 days later, rumors started moving through local business circles. Nothing public yet, just quiet concern. Evan's division had apparently overcommitted projected rollout timelines after the acquisition. Client retention was softer than the internal celebration suggested. And the new CEO, Mara, was conducting what one mutual contact called a very adult review of childish assumptions. That phrasing almost made me laugh. Then the first visible sign appeared. A press release about operational restructuring. Careful language. Alignment. Integration discipline. Resource realignment. Corporate language is very good at dressing up damage before the market fully understands it. Then came the leadership changes. Not public terminations. Not immediately, but enough movement that anyone paying attention understood the story behind the wedding was no longer the story inside the company. Evan called me 2 nights later. He sounded off balance for the first time in years. Not broken, just less certain. He asked whether I had spoken to Mara after the wedding. That question told me all I needed to know. He did not ask how I was. He did not mention the toast. He went straight to what mattered to him now, which was whether the room he thought he controlled that night had actually turned against him. I told him yes. There was silence. Then he asked what I said. I told him the truth. I told her what my app did, what clients used it, what problems it solved, and I answered the questions she asked. That was all. He exhaled sharply and said, "You made me look terrible." That sentence clarified everything. Not the toast, not the company, everything. He still believed reality was something another person could make him look bad inside, not something his own choices exposed on their own. I told him no. He made himself look terrible the moment he turned someone else's work into entertainment in front of the wrong witness. Then I hung up. That was when the real fall began. The company did not collapse in one dramatic headline. That is what people who have never worked near fragile success misunderstand about corporate failure. The public story usually arrives late. The real collapse begins in confidence, then spreads into structure, and only afterward becomes legible enough for outsiders to name. Evan's division started losing internal protection first. Mara cut 2 speculative growth tracks that he had championed loudly after the acquisition. Then she froze a hiring plan that had been designed around future demand, not present proof. Then, quietly, she reevaluated the reporting assumptions that had allowed his team to speak about performance as if traction and momentum were the same thing. They are not. Momentum can be theater. Traction has receipts. By the end of the month, 2 of Evan's direct reports had been reassigned. Then one left. Then another. It became obvious, even to people outside the company, that the internal confidence everyone had celebrated at the wedding had not survived contact with more serious scrutiny. My parents felt the shift before they understood it. My mother called me one evening asking whether something was going on because Evan had become harder to reach and more irritable than usual. My father, who used to describe him as unstoppable, started saying things like these transitions happen in business, which was his way of lowering expectations without admitting he had attached too much of himself to his son's image. I did not say much, not because I wanted to punish them, because I had finally learned that not every truth is owed in advance to people who laugh first and ask later. About a month after the wedding, Mara emailed me again. This time the tone was different, not casual curiosity, more direct. She asked if I would be open to discussing a pilot integration conversation with a company adjacent to hers that was looking for better field scheduling infrastructure. Not an acquisition. Not yet. A serious conversation. That single email did not change my life on its own, but it did something else. It put evidence where Evan had tried to place ridicule. And once evidence enters the story, mockery starts sounding much more expensive. I did not tell my family about the meeting. Not because I wanted secrecy, because I wanted one thing in my life that had not been filtered through their hierarchy of who counts as impressive. The meeting went well, then better than well. Within 6 weeks, I had my first real enterprise pilot conversation with support I had not expected to receive so early. Nothing was guaranteed, but for the first time, my work existed in a room where seriousness was not rationed according to someone else's status. That changed me, not because success suddenly arrived, because I stopped needing my family's misunderstanding to define the size of what I was building. Evan's downfall, meanwhile, kept unfolding in exactly the opposite way. The more pressure came, the more obvious it became that his strength had always depended too much on atmosphere. He was exceptional in rooms. He was weaker in structures. And once a company no longer rewards atmosphere the way a wedding does, people like him start looking different. There was one final moment that ended whatever hope I had of recovering the old version of our relationship. It happened at my parents' house. Sunday dinner. quiet, strained, too much pretending. My mother was trying to make things normal by serving the same meal she always did when the family felt unstable, as if repetition itself might restore trust. Evan arrived late. He looked tired, sharper around the eyes, less polished than usual. My father asked how work was going. He gave a short answer about restructuring and strategic shifts, all corporate language, nothing human. Then my mother, trying to lighten the room, said she still thought the toast had been funny in hindsight and that maybe one day we would all laugh about the wedding again. The room went silent. I looked at her and realized she still did not understand the central wound. Not really. Evan picked up that silence and, for the first time, made an actual attempt at apology. He said, "I shouldn't have said what I said." Then he looked at me and added, "I didn't realize it would matter that much." That sentence ended it. Because of course he did. That was the whole point. He said it because it mattered. Because it lowered me. Because the room was full of people whose attention he wanted to organize around him. I told him that the problem was never only that he mocked the app. It was that he needed me to look small in order for him to feel large in that room. And if a man needs that at his own wedding, in front of his new CEO, then the problem is much deeper than one bad toast. He looked stunned, which almost insulted me more than the toast had. Then he said something quietly, almost defensively. I was trying to keep the energy up. There it was again. The room, the mood, the performance. Not truth, not respect, not brotherhood. Energy. I told him then that his company did not start falling apart because Mara was harsh, or because the market was unfair, or because he had bad luck. It started falling apart because the same instinct that made him turn my work into a joke had already been running through his professional life. He mistook confidence for credibility, atmosphere for structure, and applause for proof. No one spoke after that for a while. Then my father, to his credit, said the one sentence I had needed someone else in the family to say out loud. He said, "Your brother is right." Not to me, to Evan. Then he added, "You don't humiliate people who are building real things unless you need the room to believe something about yourself." That sentence changed the room more than anything else had, because my father had finally stopped protecting status long enough to recognize what happened. Late, yes. But clearly, Evan did not argue. That was the strangest part. He just sat there, staring at his plate as if the words had found a part of him too tired to keep performing. Then dinner ended the way all damaged family dinners do, with dishes, silence, and an atmosphere no one could fix with politeness anymore. Exposed stories media often features stories where public humiliation becomes the beginning of a deeper collapse. This was one of those stories. Not because the universe punishes rude people on schedule, because humiliation often reveals the exact mindset that later fails under pressure. The need to control perception, the dependence on rooms, the instinct to shrink other people's credibility when it threatens your own status. Evan's company did not fail overnight. It eroded. His title remained for a while, but his influence narrowed. Projects moved away from him. The people who once laughed loudest around him stopped laughing at all. And eventually, he was transitioned out of the role he had spent years treating like proof of who he was. My app did not become a global success overnight either. That is not the ending. The ending is simpler and, to me, more meaningful. It became real enough that no one in my family could keep calling it little without sounding foolish. More importantly, I stopped hearing their old language in my own head. That is a kind of freedom people underestimate. My relationship with Evan never recovered fully. We still speak, sometimes. But something essential died the night he made my work into entertainment and mistook the laughter around him for safety. If there is one lesson in this story, it is not simply that my brother mocked my little app during his wedding toast and his new CEO happened to be in the audience. It is that people reveal themselves most clearly when they think a room belongs to them. Who they lower, who they use, what they turn into a joke. Pay attention to that. Because sometimes the thing they laugh at is not small at all. Sometimes it is the only real thing in the room. And once the room clears, that truth has a way of staying visible long after the applause disappears.